How to book superstar guests for your podcast. Hi, my name is Chuck Shute, and I host an interview-style podcast that features a variety of guests. I've done over 350 episodes, and some of the bigger names I've had on the show include Oscar winner Billy Bob Thornton, Emmy winner David Duchovny, Daryl DMC McDaniels of Run DMC, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member Ann Wilson of Heart, comedian Mark Normand, Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, reality star Corinne Olympios from The Bachelor, Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, author Jack Carr, and many more. So let's start with the easiest way to get guests on your show. The easiest way is actually going to just be direct contact. This is how I started, is just by messaging people directly on Instagram or Facebook or through a contact button or a contact email on their website. And you can also try Twitter, and depending on which kind of guest you're trying to reach, LinkedIn may be a great resource for you as well. I think direct contact works very well. It's easy and sometimes very quick in setting up interviews with guests who aren't huge and can still respond to their messages and emails, and you don't have to go through a third party like a publicist or manager. Now, for some of the bigger guests, they may have more followers and people reaching out to them for various things, and they just don't have time to respond directly to every message, so they hire a publicist. Some managers handle these requests as well, but oftentimes they have a manager and a separate publicist or a publicity agency that sets up all the interviews for media and press. So you'll need to reach out to the publicists and publicity agencies for some of the bigger guests. Sometimes the publicist is listed on the person's website, and sometimes it isn't. If it isn't, then it may be harder to track down. You can use a pay site like IMDb Pro or other pay sites to get contact information, but sometimes even these sites won't have the information. And if they aren't putting the contact information out there, a lot of times they're much more selective, so it's harder to get these guests, even if you know who the publicist is. Your best bet is to find guests who have something to promote, and that may be different depending on what kind of guest you're after. It could be a musician with a new album or tour, an author with a new book, an actor with a new movie, or a comedian with a new special. Check the upcoming book lists on Amazon, or upcoming records for music, or upcoming movies or TV shows, or whatever it is you're interested in. Find out things that people have to promote. Sometimes thinking outside of the box is good for this. For example, a big name actor might do a smaller podcast to promote his music project, or a big name rock star might have a new book out and is just doing a press junket, and the book company is booking everything, so you have a chance. Do your homework, because a lot of these celebrities may also be out promoting a product like a new coffee or a hot sauce. And remember, 50 Cent started Vitamin Water, Dr. Dre started Beats by Dre, Sammy Hagar started a tequila, and now everybody's got a side hustle. And when they launch it, there's opportunities for publicity. And a lot of times these publicists want as many interviews as possible, and they will say yes to a lot of different podcasts. So another thing, many celebrities have a charity, and I end every episode promoting a charity. If a guest you're interested in has a charity of their own, that may be something that they want to promote on a podcast, so you can use that angle. Okay, so once you've found the guest and their contact, then what do you say? So for your pitch, I would say get straight to the point. 5 sentences or so, maybe less even, and you just want to make sure you introduce yourself, explain what kind of value you're bringing to the table, and how are you going to help them? Because why is it worth it for them to do your podcast? We know what you're getting. You're typically getting a celebrity or a bigger name than yourself. But again, it goes back to you want to bring value. So if they have something to promote, you can offer to help promote that new album, book, movie, hot sauce, or whatever. You also want to list some kind of credentials. It helps if you've already had some guests on your show. You can let them know a few names that may make sense, and make sure the guests you're mentioning have something in common with the guest that you're reaching out to. So for example, if I'm reaching out to a comedian, I'll mention other comedians that have done the show. One hack here is that what you can do is look at the guest on Twitter or Instagram and see who they're following. And it's possible you've already interviewed people that person is following. So definitely mention those names when reaching out. Another hack with this, if you haven't interviewed anybody, the guest that you're targeting is following, that might be a good place to start. For example, there may be a rock star you really want on your show, and you see that he is following maybe an obscure punk band on Twitter. Maybe it's easier to start with the smaller punk band and some other artists that they're following before you reach out to the big rock star. This is a good tip in general, especially when first starting out. Try reaching out to the smaller fish first. You will have a better chance to land guests who are not big name celebrities, and they can help you build a resume that eventually gives you the clout to reach out to some of the bigger names. And honestly, a lot of times the less famous guests can be more fun. And really, fame is a sliding scale, right? Because there are probably some very famous soccer players out there that I have no idea who they are. There are a lot of people that I've had on my show who aren't necessarily household names, but I am a big fan of them. And if you're a fan of them, there are probably other people who are a fan too. And many of my favorite guests are well-respected musicians, comedians, and authors, and they're great guests who are very popular and famous in their respective fields. The important thing is that most of the people you reach out to, you should be excited about them because that will translate to a good interview. Okay, another good tip I can give you is to be flexible with publicists. If you work a day job, it may be harder to book some guests because they may only be doing interviews in a certain window. I've always tried to be as flexible and available as possible to the publicists and the guests, and this has helped me out. And also be consistent and reliable with publicists and guests. If you schedule an interview, don't flake out and no-show or be late. If you get that reputation, it's going to be very hard to get out of it. And not showing up or being late will definitely not help you get repeat business with the publicist. Another idea, if you're just starting out and there are guests you're interested in but can't get, see what podcasts they've been on, and maybe you'll become a fan of some of these podcasts they've done, and you can have on the podcast host on your show. It's much easier to get a podcast host usually than a celebrity guest. But now you've got someone on your show who's had that guest, and you can pick their brain, how they did it, and how they grew their podcast, how they've made connections, and etc. Besides having a podcast, I highly recommend you do video with your podcast and start a YouTube channel. One piece of advice here is you can build up a YouTube channel without having guests. You can just create news stories or other content and have people subscribe to your channel for that content. And then when you have some numbers that you feel are big, then you can reach out to these guests with those statistics. And that's probably going to look a lot better than if you just interviewed a lot of guests and you still don't have a lot of subscribers. So this is what I'm trying to do now with my YouTube channel, trying to build it up so I have more subscribers. If you don't have a lot of subscribers, I wouldn't advertise that when you reach out to guests. They can, of course, publicists can check those numbers for yourself on YouTube or social media. And if they do ask for numbers, I recommend being honest with that because, again, you don't want a bad reputation, like a reputation for lying with the publicist. Then you won't get repeat business. Now, the easiest way to get guests is when they or their publicists reach out to you. So how do you get that to happen? Well, you got to build up a name for yourself and get some respectable numbers. Also, what helps is getting press from your interviews. I know for rock music, there are a lot of websites that will run stories about the interviews with the rock stars. And so you can look into that. And for other topics, I'm sure it's the same. I've had some sports websites do stories on my interviews, but you can't just post an interview and expect them to find it. You've got to send them the interview with a transcript and probably some story ideas or topics, at least in the beginning. Once they get to know you, then you may not have to do that anymore. Try not to get too wrapped up in the numbers, such as number of followers you have, or the guest you're targeting has, or the number of listens you get, etc. Someone might not be worldwide famous to everyone, but if you really like their work and you're a true fan, chances are there are other people who are fans too, and those people might be interested in your interview. So if you chase the follower count too much, or you chase the big name people too much, and you're not really interested in them, you're going to get burned out very fast. Also, if you aren't really a fan of the person, I think that often shows in your interviews. The best feedback I've ever gotten from listeners is usually in interviews in which I was a big fan of the guest and it clearly showed. Also, if the guest senses that you're a true fan, they're more likely to share the episode or tell their friends about it. Likewise, if you aren't really a true fan, then you're having them on just for the clicks. A lot of times they can sense that as well. Now, you can't always have every guest be someone you're a huge fan of. That's probably not realistic either. But with good research into their work, you'll probably find common ground you can talk about. And after learning more about them, you'll often become a fan at that point. And that's happened to me numerous times. Remember too, when it comes to numbers, you may have to ask a lot of people before you get a yes. And that's okay. But getting guests for a podcast can sometimes feel like a sales job. And not everyone is cut out for that. But don't get discouraged because when you do land that dream guest, it's something you can't put a price on. I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of really interesting people and people that I've been a huge fan of. And it's a great feeling when you have a good interview with someone like that, especially when they compliment you. So good luck. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to subscribe and I'll do more of these. Or feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions. Good luck.